working in partnership on intelligence work, working on the day-to-day grassroots policing that is required, but also the specialty areas that they build upon. And I do know that in the community, and last year we had an announcement of 10 police officers for the Cape Breton Region Municipality. Those 10 officers were to be detailed between 7 officers that would be designated for the Cape Breton Regional Police Service, as well as 3 officers, 3 positions that would be designated for a Safer Communities Office. And I just want to provide some background about why it is so important. And I know I've asked the Minister and the Attorney General who oversees that program with regards to supporting the community and the concerns within the policing community, the police board, the municipality, and community stakeholders about the lack of clarity for all 10 of those positions. Because as the Attorney General will appreciate, there was a major transition that happened a number of years ago. The cooperation and the evolution of relationships between municipal and RCMP policing I view to be very positive in the region and emerging into a new realm. But also, the policing issues are addressing those things that are of concern to the citizens, but also dealing with managing opportunities, because we know with growth come challenges, and thus you have to have that. So of the 7 officers that were committed to the Cape Breton Regional Police Service and the CBRM, 3 were specifically designated for drug crime and related activity in the community. We all know of the success that has been achieved by the Cape Breton Regional Police Service and building on the intelligence unit here in Nova Scotia. They've done some very effective work and been able to collaborate and build on that. And we know that in our area, regrettably, when you still have unemployment rates 3 times as much as they are in the HRM, there are realities that go beyond just counting bodies that live in a municipality and dealing with the issues within those municipalities. And the success that has been achieved in Cape Breton in dealing with drug-related crimes was a reason for committing those 3 additional officers for the community. We also know of the Sydney Port Authority, the Ports of Sydney initiative, supported by the Chamber of Commerce, supported by the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, by the federal government, by this provincial government when we invested $2 million towards building up the port master plan that was in place. In fact, that all 3 parties, all members for Cape Breton signed on to the MOU to develop the port. And in that, Mr. Speaker, in responding to the level of support activity that was increasing and being part of the Atlantic Gateway Initiative, was adding 2 officers specific to port security for the Cape Breton Regional Municipality, because we have tens of thousands of people in cruise ship activity alone that disembark without a targeted effort. And those officers were to work with the Cape Breton, to work with the federal government, to work with the RCMP, to work within the community, with the Ports Corporation, and provide them with the capacity and ability to make sure we have the safest port areas possible, because we know the federal jurisdiction, as everyone and the Minister is very clear as Attorney General, the federal government and its jurisdiction on water versus and outside of any other protocols that are established through agreement, that the onshore aspects needed that policing effort, and that's why we're pleased to work with the Cape Breton Regional Police Service, because it was a priority of the people of the community. And also, Mr. Speaker, we committed as well to build on the ICE unit, the Internet Child Exploitation Initiatives here in Nova Scotia, and to provide the Cape Breton Regional Police Service a position to deal with child pornography and the exploitation of children. And regrettably, in Nova Scotia, it's been brought startlingly to our attention, and thus the reason of its importance, because of the public response to the most recent issue of child pornography. And the issue for us, and the issue for the policing community, is not just dealing with those people accessing it, because whatever images they've accessed, some child somewhere has been abused in that process to actually be in those images. And that's something where the policing community needed to work on that. And that was an effort to add a position there with regards to the Cape Breton Regional Police Service. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, I'm building on a previous year's commitment and working with the Cape Breton District Health Authority number 8, a position in the prior year was made for a mental health officer, and I've heard the members of the government, and they recognize the importance of mental health policing, making a connect between the mental health service providers, the District Health Authority, and the policing community. And so the 7th position that was committed for the Cape Breton Regional Police Service was an additional position for a 2nd mental health officer so they could deal with around-the-clock issues, that those officers could work with their peers to understand mental health issues. And we all know, Mr. Speaker, in dealing with issues that have been here within the HRM, where there's an inquiry now, the sensitivity people have and the importance of mental health policing was there. So in some of the response from the minister, when he would say that, well, you know, we have to look at all the province-wide initiatives, everything that was committed for the Cape Breton Regional Police Service directly went to a wider network building within Nova Scotia, within Canada, and internationally. None of these initiatives, none of these positions were gratis or extra positions. They're all targeted positions that were provided to the Cape Breton Regional Municipality and its policing and justice partners in that area. Mr. Speaker, those 7 positions were to add on to the 3 positions committed to the Safer Communities Office. And I know that the Attorney General would be very keen on this, which there's no clarity as well. But in his prior role within the RCMP, he would know of the working relationships and wanting to make sure that we could collaborate between municipal and federal services. We've seen that in Pictou County and in Cape Breton. As I say, there was a transition of services that had some difficulty, and things were emerging to build on that. And when we looked at spaces within the CBRM, there were 2 RCMP detachments that were left. One was in Reserve Mines, one was in North Sydney. When we consulted with the RCMP, very clearly they recommended the space that, because they had additional capacity in the North Sydney detachment, versus the Reserve Mines detachment, where if they had strategic or tactical initiatives, especially drug-related, the RCMP would emerge through the Reserve Mines, and they didn't want to overburden that, and thus the North Sydney office was chosen. And the other thing that the RCMP indicated, it was their preference to have North Sydney as a location for the Safer Communities Office, was because it would allow them direct access to the Trans-Canada Highway, to Victoria County, as well as direct access over into the Sydney area through the 125 highway. They had immediate highway access for strategic and tactical response to deal with those things that would be important as investigators. Now, we haven't heard clarity from the minister or from the government about what they're going to do to honor these commitments that, again, I go back, they were not just padding police force or adding officers for the sake of adding officers. They're very key and strategic to the interests and the needs of safer communities, to helping with an efforts to grow the economy, to deal with the scourges on society from those that would break the law and abuse children, to dealing with the sensitivities of those facing mental health issues. The minister would also be aware, through his own statistics, of the success that's been had through the Safer Communities Initiative. And the reason for a satellite office within the Department of Justice, working in partnership with the RCMP, and then working with the Cape Breton Regional Police Service, was to make sure that we had the hands-on, that the people would be on the ground doing the investigation. Rather than traveling on the highways, they would be on the streets and in the neighborhoods of the people concerned about illegal activity going on, and be able to directly respond to those people. So, Mr. Speaker, we have not heard clarity from the Attorney General. I've heard about provincial priorities, and I don't disagree with that. But, Mr. Speaker, 7 officers were hired. Furniture was bought for a North Sydney office. And it's never the wrong time for the minister as Attorney General to do the right thing for this community. Because, again, this community was in need of these positions, was deserving of these positions, and I'm sure, I'm confident that the Attorney General will honor those commitments that were made in working with his cabinet colleagues and working with the Deputy Premier and the Premier, who understand the uniqueness within Cape Breton right now to deal with a whole wide array of issues affecting the community, and that we can actually build that broader ability to build on the initiatives that are happening as we go forward. And as the minister also knows, we've got the provincial policing contract that will come up for renewal in this province. This will help strengthen that relationship, build the bonds between municipal and federal policing services, create a strengthened relationship with the Department of Justice and public safety officials who do a phenomenal job in this province. We always know there are always more pressures. That is very clear, Mr. Speaker. The Attorney General knows from his own working career you can never possibly deal with all the pressures that are before us, but it's how we manage them and how we resource those areas where other people have stepped up to the plate to deliver services. And I know the Attorney General is working with the Chiefs of Police Association. I know the Attorney General will work with his Public Safety Division, work with his cabinet colleagues and in government to make sure that these 10 positions, 10 very focused, specific, complementary, and additional positions to deal with issues in an area that has had more than its fair share of challenges, and to help the Cape Breton Regional Municipality go through a transition to get to a growth opportunity. And as I indicate, some of these deal with managing growth. And I know, Mr. Speaker, that all colleagues from Cape Breton, regardless of what political party they're from, welcome any additions to the policing complement, another tool in the drawer of law enforcement officials to build on the capacity to address those concerns. And Mr. Speaker, we continue to have these challenges. We have a police board in Cape Breton that's looking for the clarity of the funding for the 7 positions. We have communities looking to find out where the status of the Safer Communities Office is. And again, Mr. Speaker, I know the Attorney General is a reasoned and responsible person and will see that those obligations that have been made to the community are honoured. But the reason I've raised it here today and going into supply is to show that it just wasn't a matter of just saying, here's 10 positions, why didn't other communities get it? Again, Mr. Speaker, it's the 2nd largest metropolitan area. I know members of this House know that the Department of Justice prior would deal with issues within the HRM to add additional officers, as 4 were added to help Chief Baisley and his team with regards to the downtown bar establishment problems and the challenges they'd faced. They were very proactive in doing with that, in establishing the community policing and someone to see the oversight of public safety and working with the community and council and all the justice partners. And Mr. Speaker, as we go forward, I know there's other communities that all have requests for additional officers. But the 10 positions for Cape Breton, the strategic investments that were being made and were acted on sincerely because it was a legitimate need that was being met by the government that I was part of. But I also know it was helping out. It's helped out in Whitney Pier. It's helped out in New Waterford. It's helped out in Sydney and Glace Bay. It has helped out in my own area. It has had, and while Glace Bay may have some characters, they have needs in their community, Mr. Speaker, to deal with these pressures. And I do know that the Deputy Premier, regrettably like me, has had a higher than desirable number of drug-related problems and crimes. That's what these additional officers were focused on and helping. So again, when you look at drug crimes being addressed, port security being addressed, child pornography and child exploitation being addressed, mental health policing being addressed, as well as safer communities and investigative capacity for people to know that they don't have to stay at home and stand behind their 4 walls of their house in fear that they can pick up a phone, anonymously send a concern, report an incident, and it will be investigated and action will be taken. That is doing the right thing for and by the people of this entire province, and we're meeting an acute need within Cape Breton. And I will close my remarks by reiterating for a 3rd time, it is never the wrong time to do the right thing, and I have every confidence that the Attorney General and his colleagues in Cabinet will see fit to honour the 10 policing positions so that this good work can continue, that the good partnerships and the relationships that have been forged will continue well into the future. And so with that, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my honourable colleagues for their attention, and I want to thank the Attorney General for listening attentively and knowing that he and his colleagues will follow up within the Cape Breton community and know that there was a business case worthy of the investment of this government, and I will look forward to standing in my place another day and complimenting them in honouring those commitments and congratulating them for doing what is good. Thank you.
Thank you, member. Motion carried.
Good afternoon. The committee on, good afternoon. I will now go to the government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I call now recall the debate and supply of the estimates for the Department of Health.
Thank you. The Committee on Supply will now be called to order. The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I want to pick up where I left off last time that I had the opportunity to ask the Minister some questions. I want to continue with long-term care facilities. You know, the Minister indicated earlier in the House, in the committee, that the government wants to do everything possible to keep seniors in their own home or in their own community. And I certainly share the Minister's opinion on that. Mr. Chair, we know that when families apply to place loved ones in nursing homes, in a long-term care facility, there is a policy in place. It's called the first available bed provision. Basically, individuals can be placed within 100 kilometers from their home. I know, especially in Clare, the last several years, we had individuals, especially seniors, Francophone seniors that were probably in their 80s or even in their 90s that could only speak French, that were being placed elsewhere. I had the opportunity to raise these concerns in the House previously. The government did actually made a provision to that policy that when individuals are placed on waiting lists, waiting for a long-term care bed, when their name comes to the top, of course, the family receives a call and an offer or a facility is offered to place their loved one in that nursing care. Unfortunately, sometimes because of could be there's no family or part of the family don't have the means of traveling away to visit their loved one. Especially Francophone seniors have the opportunity now to be placed near their home or within 100 kilometers from their home. So they have the opportunity now to refuse an offer that's being made without losing their place on the waiting list. But, Madam Minister, something that the people of Clare still has concerns with is when some of our elderly Francophone residents are being placed in nursing homes outside of Clare, and I'll explain why. Not long ago, for example, Mr. Chair, we had an individual from Bridgewater that was placed at the Villa Acadienne in Meteghan. At the same time, we had someone from Clare that was placed in Granville Ferry, just outside of Annapolis Royal. Now, of course, many people in Clare does not understand the logic, behind this policy. Certainly would be a lot easier to have the individual from Bridgewater that was placed in Meteghan to move up that individual in Annapolis Royal, and to have the person from Clare living in Annapolis Royal transferred to Meteghan. It certainly would make it a lot easier for that individual from Bridgewater to travel from Bridgewater to Annapolis. It would certainly cut an hour or an hour and a half in traveling to visit their loved one in Annapolis rather than driving down to Meteghan. So I've been asked this question many, many times. How come the department does not have a better system, or why in the first place the department allows this to happen? So my first question to the minister is,
why does the department, or why doesn't the department switch residents from nursing homes when the opportunity arises, to make it easier for families, especially to travel, to visit their loved ones? So again, my question to the minister is, why doesn't the department, basically look at maybe reviewing their policy or switching these residents to make it easier for these families?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the honourable member for his question. And I understand the frustrations. I've had them myself, but in a different way. Certainly, I don't represent a unique Francophone community, and I understand the absolute need of people to stay in their own communities and receive services in their own languages. And it's something that I will be asking our department to look at, and with a view to doing some community consultation, perhaps meeting with members such as the honourable member who's been here for many years, who would have a perspective that would be very valuable, as well as others. I know there are a lot of organizations in your community, seniors, that represent seniors and other groups. And of course, some of the long-term care facilities themselves in the area, to see what it is that we could do to enhance the quality of services that are available to seniors from the Argyll area, and I'm sorry, the Clare area. And I do know that sometimes it's not always possible. If somebody needs a bed in a kind of an urgent situation, a really critical situation, and a bed comes opened and it's not in the immediate vicinity, the single entry point has this this process where, when your name comes up, you get placed. And then if there's a need for a transfer, then you're sort of highlighted as a potential transfer. But it seems to me, and maybe with the devolving of this sector into the DHAs, I see that as an opportunity, hopefully, to build a little more flexibility into the current system. A flexibility that will allow for taking into account the unique circumstances that may exist in different communities around a DHA. I think when you have a provincial system that is centrally designed, controlled, and executed, there's probably a greater tendency to adhere to a set of rules in a less flexible way than you might get if you have that administered in a district. I don't know that to be the case, but I'm just speculating that that could be the case. And certainly I have the benefit of having had a deputy minister who comes out of the DHA experience, and I think he would understand and would be able to advise and inform the department a lot about the DHA perspective around placements and the policy and the procedures that need to reflect the realities of the communities within any particular DHA, and it may not necessarily be the same in all communities. So I think the policies that we have, like all policies, should be reviewed regularly with a view to the question always is, how well is it working for people? How well is it working for the people who need these services? And in my experience as a member of the legislature over time, I've advocated for many families. Even here in the metro area, sometimes you'll get a family that lives in the north end of Halifax, for example, or somewhere here on the peninsula, who has a loved one who's placed in a long-term care facility in Windsor, because Windsor is in the Capital District Health Authority. And for some of us, that may not sound like such a big deal, but it's a very big deal for family members or a spouse who doesn't drive, who doesn't have a car, who doesn't have easy access to getting to Windsor to visit their family member. And it has been very difficult for constituents of mine to maintain the contact. I have a number of senior citizens manors in my constituency in the north end of Halifax, and one of those manors is Dr. Sam Prince Manor. And the population of that manor is primarily women. There are some men there, but I would say probably 80–85% of the people who live in that manor are women. It's a manor where everybody has their own self-contained unit. It's like an apartment or a condo. You're independent. You do your own cooking and cleaning and what have you. But some of the residents have lived there for 25 years or more. They went in their mid-60s, and they're in their 80s now. They get home care services and other services. But from time to time, a resident of Sam Prince Manor will end up no longer able to live independently, and they will go into a long-term care facility, and perhaps they'll end up in the Windsor area, and their whole network, the people they've been living with for the past 25 or 30 years from Dr. Sam Prince Manor, who they've played cards with, who they've gone to bingo with, who they've attended church with, they know all of the family members of the other people. Suddenly they lose all contact with their social network, their friends. And I've had residents from Sam Prince Manor approach me as their MLA different times to say, you know, we haven't been able to see so-and-so. There's no transportation to the Windsor area. We have to arrange this. We're not in a position to do that. And we know that this person is lonely and has no family members living here. We've been that person's family. So I understand this. I understand the issue that the member is raising, and you add into the mix the fact that in some instances, members of the community of Meteghan will be in a long-term care facility where the first language is not their first language. And so a review and a way to examine how we can improve services is a valid request, and it's one that we will take under consideration and see what we can do.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly welcome the minister's comments, that maybe it's time to review the current policy on placement, and maybe there's a possibility of improving services in helping placing loved ones in nursing homes. The minister also talked about, sometimes there's urgent placement, and I fully agree. Depending on the circumstances, you need a bed, right away, and I certainly have no problem with that, and I'm sure people in Clare certainly would have no problem with that either. But this is individuals that have applied or families that have applied to place loved ones in nursing homes, and unfortunately, when they get contacted, placements are basically offered outside of our area. Sometimes it's at least an hour away. And again, as the minister pointed out, especially for people that have no means of traveling, certainly creates other problems. So again, I'm glad to hear the minister that she will take it back to her department and hopefully to improve upon the services. Mr. Chair, I want to again continue. Earlier, I had talked about the round one when the government announced, I think it was 832 new long-term care beds back in 2007. So I want to return back to that decision. Mr. Chair, very few of these new beds are going to Acadian areas. You know, apart from the 22 beds that have been assigned to Naquil, home for special care in Glenwood, which is located in my colleague from Argyll area. As the minister is aware, there's over or close to 40,000 Acadians in our province, with the majority located in areas such as Chetika, Île-Madame, Argyll, and Clare, of course. So my question to the minister is, will she consider allocating some new beds to our Acadian communities in the next round of announcing new long-term care beds, whenever that may come about? She did indicate, you know, that the government is currently looking at the situation right now. There's no time frame when that second round may come about, but I would certainly encourage the minister and her department to at least give some consideration to provide some new beds to the Acadian communities.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank the honourable member for the question, Mr. Chair. And we certainly will consider allocating beds in round two to Acadian communities. And I want to let the honourable member know, Mr. Chair, that my colleague, the Minister of Finance, who is also the Minister of Acadian Affairs, has asked to meet with the continuing care folks and the deputy in the department, and certainly he and I have talked as well about his interest in knowing more about the services that are being provided in the healthcare sector in Francophone communities around the province, and he's interested in knowing more so that he can be a better advocate and planner and problem solver on behalf of those communities. And so this will be certainly occurring. I don't know if I've ever told the honourable member this or not. I grew up in a small community called Linwood in Antigonish County, which is between two Acadian communities, the Acadian community of Tracadie and Harvard-Boucher. And when I was a young girl and going to school, all of my friends were from those Acadian communities, including Pomcat. I went to Antigonish Easton Monastery, and many of the traditions in my Irish Scottish household have blended quite a few Acadian traditions. I notice at Christmas time the kinds of food and various things that occur, as well as other holidays. So I always consider myself extremely fortunate, and I think Nova Scotians are very fortunate. We have an amazing blend of cultures in this province, and of course the Acadian people are unique, have a unique, sometimes tragic history, and that we still have such vibrant Acadian communities, such as the one in the Matagan area, it's extraordinary, and we're extraordinarily lucky to be in this position. I also want to say to the honourable member, although I don't have a lot of information at my fingertips, one of the first briefings I had, and perhaps the member from Argyll would know more about this, but one of the first briefings I had in the department, which really excited me, was the success that is being seen in the training of some young adults from your communities who are training to be medical doctors in a program that we are cooperating in between our province and the province of Quebec, I believe. And so when this was not something that I was aware of, and it's been very successful in terms of recruiting a substantial number of people. I think it's 8 or more young people in this program who are, going on to complete degrees as MDs, and it's very exciting. And the promise then that has for the future in terms of having physician services in Acadian communities in Nova Scotia, I think bodes very well. So anyway, that's just a little aside from your questions, but it's, it does demonstrate some of the really good things that are going on, as well as some of the challenges we have.
The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was pleased to hear the minister say that she will give some consideration in announcing new long-term care beds for Acadian communities throughout the province. Mr. Chair, I want to move to the assessment for placement. I had a situation this past summer, and I'm seeking information because I don't really understand how the process, the system works. Anyhow, I'll provide the minister with some details. This situation, the family had applied to place a family member in a residential care facility. This is back in early April of this year. Looking at early May, the applicant was denied. Of course, additional medical information was sent to the department in late May. So let's begin in late May. New medical information was provided to the department to help them with the assessment of the individual in question. And in late August, the admission was approved. So, of course, throughout that time, the family kept on calling my office, and in return, I called the department on several times to try to get some information on the application during this time. Of course, I don't know how many people in the department do the assessments when they come in. At the same time, when you're looking at trying to tell people basically why it's taking so long, you don't have that information. I didn't know if people were on vacation. So I'm trying to find out for myself, and of course, I'm sure all members of this committee would certainly appreciate finding out, what the process is when an application is forwarded to the department to be assessed for placement. So my question through you, Mr. Chair, is can the minister explain to me what the process entails or involves in order to do an assessment for an application that comes into the department?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. To the honourable member, Mr. Chair, through you, I can only provide quite a general explanation, if you wish, of what that process looks like. But I'd be happy to get you a more detailed, a bit more detailed explanation from people who are more expert than I. It used to be the case that if a family had a family member and they felt at this stage this person required 24-hour care, and the family doctor had concerns that there needs to be 24-hour care for an individual, nursing care, because of some medical issues. Families were free to approach individual long-term care facilities and make applications. And as I explained earlier in estimates one day, that sometimes people could be on multiple lists. Family members may have had family members on multiple lists because they would have maybe approached 2 or 3 homes. They would have their first choice, their second choice, their third choice. But they would hope, that they could get in somewhere. Well, I would think, I'm not sure precisely when we went to the single entry point, the single entry system, but we went to a system where there's a 1-800 number, and there's also a website that you can go to, and you can call, and you can start the process. And so everybody goes into sort of a centralized entry point, shall we say. Although, having said that, as I understand it, there are still regional offices where coordinators, care coordinators who do assessments reside. They don't necessarily all reside in a centralized place. And so you make contact and make a request for an assessment, and an assessment is done. A care coordinator would conduct a home visit, and also there are lots of documentation that's required, including a medical assessment from the family physician. And after the information is gathered, a determination is made based on the information what level of care is required. Now, we've made reference here over the past few days from time to time about the MAPLE, the MAPLE assessment. And this is a standardized assessment tool that is used throughout the Western world in doing assessments. And it's not only used for doing assessments for long-term care, but it can also be used to determine whether or not a person requires home care, or whether or not a person and what kind of home care. Do they need nursing home care, or do they need light housekeeping, homemaker kind of home care? So some people require very light levels of care, and other people require basically institutional care. And that's the range. And the assessments are done by assessors who are trained in the use of the assessment tools. These folks generally have degrees, perhaps in nursing or social work, family studies, gerontology, a variety of backgrounds that is then also augmented with some specialized training that's done with respect to the assessment tools. Is this system a perfect system? There are no perfect systems. Are all assessments 100% accurate without any subjectivity? There is no such thing as assessments that don't have some subjective elements. And for that reason, then, there can always be a request for a review or for additional information. Sometimes I've seen situations in my own constituency when an assessment has been done and a critical piece of information wasn't provided just because it was the right question wasn't asked, or the right question wasn't asked, or a critical piece of information wasn't provided because maybe a family member didn't think it was relevant, and then in a discussion with a neighbor or something a couple of weeks later would realize that was relevant. I should have said, that this is something, my mother's been falling. She's had 4 falls in the last 6 months and never received any hospital attention for it. But this has been going on now on a repeat basis, and maybe I should, maybe this is information we need to provide.
Thank you. The honourable member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Minister for that information. I also want to add, during my numerous inquiries to the department, especially throughout June, July, and August, staff that responded to my inquiries were very helpful, very patient with me, and I certainly thank them along the way. But from the family side, when I heard from a member basically that was looking after her sister's application, was asking me questions that I didn't really have the answers. Why was it taking so long? I just, kept on calling the department, and along the way they were extremely helpful. So I certainly appreciated the help that they provided. Mr. Chair, I want to move to a different topic. I want to talk about the caregiver's allowance. There's been lots said so far in this chamber. Mr. Chair, when this program was announced late summer, I can tell you the people of Clare certainly called my office, and I will share with the Minister with some of those details. The Minister talked about that the department was looking at helping around 740 caregivers under the new caregiver allowance program. My question to the Minister, or various questions, is I'm trying to find out how the department is going to make those decisions. Does the department, are they looking at dividing this total throughout the province? Does each health district have they been given an allocation of how many they're allowed to approve? Is it first come, first serve? So I guess trying to get a better understanding in terms of the individuals that will qualify and will be approved under this program. I'm just curious if the Minister could elaborate on how the department will determine what caregiver will receive approval under this program.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I thank the honourable member for the question. As I've said before, the Caregivers Allowance Program was designed by the previous government, but after having done a pilot project for a couple of months in several districts, and the pilot project had a requirement that in order to receive the allowance, you had to be on the wait list for long-term care, a long-term care facility. And additionally, you had to agree, if you were going to receive the allowance, that the person who you were caring for, had to agree to come off the list in order to receive the allowance. That's in the pilot project. And the pilot project was in the Department of Community Services. And there was an evaluation. There was an evaluation after a period of time. Now, I can't remember exactly how many people received the allowance. It was, under 200, I think. It was like 100 and some odd people. And in fact, there are still about 27 or 29 people still receiving that allowance as it existed under the in-home support pilot project. Now, one of the things that the department found when they analyzed that program, that pilot project, they found, in fact, that there were some problems with the requirement that you come off the list to go into a long-term care facility. And why would that be? Well, why that would be was you would have had gone through an assessment with a lot of medical information that would have said that you require your needs, your care needs were at the level where you were required 24-hour, round-the-clock care with a nursing component. And so removing those folks from the long-term care list was probably not in their interest, not a good idea. And in fact, many people who had gotten the allowance and came off the list, in the end, really had to go into long-term care. So it didn't, in effect, keep people in their own homes at all, So the decision of the previous government was to transfer that program from the Department of Community Services to the Department of Health, and to redesign some aspect of that program, to redesign the aspect of the pilot project that required you had to be on the list for long-term care. So what that meant was there would be no previous assessment already done when you applied for the caregiver's allowance. So the caregiver's allowance, as announced in August, and as I said, the only difference between the previous pilot project and the existing program now is that requirement to come off the long-term care wait list has been changed. We didn't make any changes to the former government's program. We announced the program. We said it was a targeted program. We said that people who were eligible would receive the allowance. And we explained that the program was targeted to people with high need and very low income, and some other criteria. The budget that we are currently examining, the Department of Health budget, for this year, because the program didn't come into effect at the first of the fiscal year, $2.7 million is allocated for the caregiver's allowance. And if we were to have a full year, it would be $3.5 million. And that would allow for 737 people to receive the care allowance. Now, your question is, when we hit, if we hit the ceiling, if we hit the maximum, what happens if there are more applicants? And as I understand it, if that were to occur, we would have to sit down in the department and look at whether or not we have spending, let's say, in another program that is underutilized that we could move in to accommodate more people, or just say, well, first come, first serve. We haven't made that decision in the department. We haven't set a limit that this is how many people we are assisting in this program and no more. We are, as I indicated in question period today, we feel we are on target in terms of the numbers of people who have applied and been assessed and who have met the criteria. We understand that there are people who are disappointed that they didn't qualify, and they feel that they should have qualified. As I've said, we continue to look at this program, but also to learn from this program in terms of this government's commitment to introduce an in-home support program, which was part of our platform and planned for the coming fiscal year after this one.
The honourable member from Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, earlier today, the Minister provided the House with numbers on how many people have applied for the Caregivers Allowance Program. She told us that 140 caregivers were approved, 286 are still on a waiting list, and 276 don't qualify. Can the Minister, or does the Minister, have a breakdown of these numbers by health district? Or if she does, or if she doesn't have them, will she undertake to table those numbers by health district?
The Honourable Minister for Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think it certainly is possible to get those numbers by health district, and I would undertake to do that. In all seriousness, Mr. Chair, it wasn't an easy chore to get these numbers. It wasn't an easy chore because so much of the care coordination is decentralized and it's out in the districts. And while I'm more than happy to ask for the breakdown, the people were asking to provide this information, and I want to thank them for providing me with what I have right now. When we ask them to take time to provide us with numbers, sometimes that means an assessment, doesn't get done. And they work very hard, and I know the members know this. But if you would be patient, I guess, I'm not saying we won't get you the numbers, but what I'm saying is be patient in terms of us getting them. We won't get them to you like today or tomorrow, but we can give you the breakdown from the districts eventually, okay?
The Honourable Member for Clare.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I certainly appreciate the Minister to undertake to provide those numbers to the community. Mr. Chair, I know in Clare, in our constituency office, we've had probably, I would say, close to 75 individuals that have contacted us for information on this Caregivers Allowance Program. Since the government announced it, I think it was in early August. And plus, I have to include on top of those the individuals that have contacted the Continuing Care Office directly for information. So when I see these numbers, there's something strange with them. Maybe the Minister could explain to us, are these numbers up to date? Do these numbers cover a certain period? The first 2 weeks after the announcement was made. I'm just looking at the volume of calls that I've received in my constituency office, and I know Clare is just a tiny little piece when I look at these numbers, and immediately I'm telling myself, maybe I don't think it really matches what I've been hearing, especially on the ground. At the same time, does the minister know how many people from Clare have applied, and how many people in Clare have been approved? Mr. Chair, I know my time is coming to an end, so I will leave those questions with the minister. I think there may be a few minutes left.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, I can't tell you specifically how many people from Clare applied, but let me say this, that I know this is a very popular program. I know that there were many people who were very interested in knowing about this program. The calls that came in, we got many more calls than the numbers you see in front of us, but it doesn't mean they were applications or referrals. The calls that we got many calls into the line, we can't tell you how many, because there were repeat calls. Some people called multiple times. We don't count multiple calls. We don't count people who don't meet the income criteria. They call and they say, I'd like to apply for the caregivers, I'm looking after my mother, blah, 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 and when it's checked into what their income is, they don't even come close. So they're not considered an applicant, they're an inquiry. So there were more inquiries, there were many inquiries into the various, into the line around the caregivers program, and also, visits to the website as well. And so this is quite possible. I've spoken to people. I understand what the member is saying. I spoke to a lady who called the department, and she was very upset, and her income was significantly beyond the low income cutoff for this program. And her basic position was that we should change the income criteria, that the income criteria was wrong. And so those calls aren't reflected in these numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much for the questioning from the member for Clare. Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the questions that he had when it came to the 100-kilometre rule, the issue of the Francophone policy, and maybe at a later date I'll ask some more questions around that one too. One that I had to wrestle with over the bit. Of course, the policy is one that I worked on when I was minister responsible for Canadian affairs with, I believe it was with Angus at the time when he was minister, that we were able to make that adjustment. And of course, took a lot of questions from the minister, from the member from Clare, when he was asking questions quite often for his constituency and making sure people receive service in that area. I'm going to defer off a little bit on that one and maybe ask a few questions more specific to some budget lines, and more specifically budget lines or differences in budget from the May 4th budget to this budget. It's basically our budget and your budget, and see how some of those things match up. So Linda should be able to get that paperwork ready. The first thing that I want to talk about is the travel program. One, the travel program for people receiving surgeries and what have you outside the province, like the lung transplant program, other transplant programs that are out there. And there's basically a difference in the program. I believe our line item was somewhere around $250,000, and I believe you're adding about $500,000 to that for a total of $750,000. So I'm just very wondering what kind of criteria we're going to be using for this fund. Again, I know how difficult it is because there are so many people asking about this program.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and the honourable member is correct in terms of the financial information with respect to the program. his government had allocated $270,000 and toward this program, and we've added approximately $500,000, which was our commitment in the election campaign to have a program of $750,000 travel program. The staff in the department are busily working on finalizing the details of a program. But I don't mind talking about the general features of that program. You know, Mr. Chair, from time to time, it doesn't happen a lot, but from time to time, a resident of our province has has a health care need that cannot be met in the province of Nova Scotia by anybody. The service that is required to treat that condition does not exist in our province. Now, the former Minister of Health will know some people will get that confused with having to wait for a procedure that is available, okay? If the procedure is available here in the province, even if you have to wait for it, this policy will not apply if you decide on your own to go to another province and get medical health care, because you can get it quicker. Our department has a policy that if you cannot get the treatment you require here in the province of Nova Scotia, and the treatment is available somewhere else, we have a process you go through. Your doctor provides medical information, it's reviewed in the department by physicians, and a determination is made, and a pre-approval has to be sought and given, and then the medical costs of that procedure will be covered by the province of Nova Scotia. And so our government has committed to not only covering the medical costs when that occurs, but to assist in the transportation and the accommodation costs associated with having to seek treatment outside the province. And we're looking at what would be reasonable. What would be reasonable in terms of providing associated costs. And we have had many discussions between staff and myself in the department, and we're looking at what is done in other jurisdictions. Newfoundland has a policy, but Newfoundland is a little bit different than here, because many procedures that need to be done in Newfoundland often have to be done out of province. And we have had assistance available for people going to Ontario for lung transplants, I believe. And so there are some programs, or there is a program in place, but basically you have to be away for three months, I think, before that program kicks in, where there are circumstances where people might have to go just for 2 or 3 days. So we're certainly looking at a wide variety of scenarios and trying to look at the resources we have with a view to finding something that will really make a difference for families that face these situations. And when that policy has been completed, we certainly will be announcing it and promoting it. And if the member has any suggestions, I would be happy to hear from him on that.
Thank you, Minister. The chair will recognize the honourable member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island, on an introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sitting in the East Gallery are two students from the Teaching English as a Second Language program at St. Mary's University, Khaled Al-Jihad from Saudi Arabia, and Manami Kanada from Japan. These students are working to raise their proficiency in English to a level that will enable them to study at an English language university. And they're accompanied by their teacher, Bill Kopitz. I asked them to rise and receive the warm applause of this House and the encouragement of this House.
The chair welcomes all visitors to the galleries and hope you enjoys tonight's proceedings. The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too welcome our visitors tonight. This is a good tune-up for the regular proceedings in the House, which of course is done in a more conversational manner with the questioning to the minister. Normally during question period, it definitely is more heated and quicker. Snappier, I guess is what you would call it. So, of course, to our members, and I believe in Japanese it would be konnichiwa, and I think in Arabic I'm thinking marhaba or... Are they acknowledging? Yeah, something like that. So I thought if they're shaking up and down, because I can't see their heads, so... But welcome to the House of Assembly. Thank you very much for your answers on the travel program. And this was one that I did wrestle with towards the end of my mandate at the Department of Health. When it came to travel costs outside. And when we really brought forward the issue, and it really was brought forward by the Liberal caucus and the member for Richmond, when it came to a couple of his constituents who were having to live in Toronto awaiting a double lung transplant. And in that double lung transplant, you have to sit there, you got to be ready, you need to be within a certain distance of the hospital, and you can end up sitting there for months and months and months, if not years. And what was happening, of course, with these constituents from Richmond was that their money was coming to an end, and they had to quickly make a decision whether they moved back home, where their expenses, of course, wouldn't be so high, and forgo the double lung transplant that the patient needed so badly. So I was very happy to provide them with some funding within the scope of dollars that we did have, which was, like, again, a very difficult story to come up with. We really wrestled with, is it the pre-flights that we're going to have to do, because of course you would probably have to visit the hospital on 2 or 3 different occasions prior to acceptance. You would then have to fly there and move there and stay there. And then, of course, the post-operation, the post-follow-up, that still has to happen in Toronto in this particular case. So there's a number of flights, a number of living hours, a number of time. So when we looked at it in context with the budget that we had, we decided that we would sort of pick the living cost itself, the rent and some ancillary costs that would go with that, to try to knocked down. So we didn't really look at the flight piece, and I'm very glad that you are looking at that, because that can be a very substantial cost as well. The other issue would be the transfer of loved ones as well. It's not very much fun sitting waiting for a transplant in Toronto with nobody you know. And a lot of times to have a loved one come physically, mentally is good for the patient as well. To keep them as well as possible before that transplant actually happens. So I'm very happy to see that addition to the budget for the Department of Health. And so when it comes to the application process, I know it's going to be a very difficult one, one that will have to require some medical expertise and all that, because I can tell you, things like that came to the minister's office was always a debate and a number of sleepless nights that always went with it. I want to move on as well to the announcement during the budget, during the presentations from the Department of Health officials, and I'm going to just the number I have is out of the budget presentation or budget overview that was done by officials. The PowerPoint presentation that they gave. In it, it talks about spending increase of $216.3 million, which is salary and benefit increases for DHAs, implementation telecare program, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering what compromises maybe a better breakdown of that $216.3 million extra.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank the honourable member. The big items: $103.3 million for wage increases, $28.8 million for capital grants, and $84.2 million for operations. And I can give you a bit more detail in the breakdown, or I can break that down a bit. Okay. There was an increase of $5.6 million for fee-for-service, so utilization. And that, I understand, is always an issue, or it can be an issue. There were increases there. Senior pharmacare payments, a $5.4 million increase there. $2 million internal transfers, health transformation and care coordination. Some smaller amounts of money for human resources, but they're quite small. I'll try to look at the larger ones here. Emergency health services, a $5.3 million increase. 4.4 paramedic wage increase, for example. Other health initiatives, provincial program, that's quite small. Okay, a $6.3 million increase in the IS4 project. This is the HASP and the electronic health records operating costs. And you know, sometimes we have to spend money to access the federal money. So again, 2.7 million wait times. So this was related to an increase for electronic health records operating costs. DHAs, a $93.5 million increase, acute care being the biggest piece of that, $84.5 million. Mostly due to contract increases, the cost of covering wages that had been negotiated in earlier collective agreements, I believe. Pension, the Nova Scotia Association of Health Organizations pension. Yes. $9.9 million increase for contributions there. Mental health services, a $6.1 million increase. And again, wages being the largest piece of that, 2.8, as well as some increase for non-wage funding increases for psychiatrists, psychologists, what have you. Home care, $5.7 million increase, primarily related to the health human resource strategy for LPNs, more classes and additional seats to try to address the nursing shortage. Long-term care, $44.2 million increase. And again, contract increases there. And $3.8 million for the pension contribution. And capital infrastructure, a $28.9 million increase. 14 of that was for emergency medical equipment, and 10 million in equipment to assist the DHAs, 9 million for repair and renewal, and 3.5 for energy retrofits for the DHAs. These increases were partly offset by reductions in federal medical equipment revenue, and so those are probably the biggest elements in the in that 216 million. The half of it is for wages, and yes.
Thank you. The honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Minister, very much for those numbers. And no, so these are numbers that are different from May 4 to now, or that's just more of a breakdown of the increases that we see overall would have been included ours and yours, kind of thing. Okay, thank you very much for that clarification on it. And I'm going to maybe have a quick look at some of those numbers as we flow along. You mentioned some dollars in order to match up with some of the infrastructure issues, maybe some federal funding dollars in that. Maybe it'd be a good opportunity to sort of ask how the wait time, the bigger wait time project, which was the addition of the radiation therapy over at the Capital District Health Authority, exactly where maybe that project is, because there had to be a construction of linear accelerator and all that bunkers and all that fun stuff. So I'm just wondering where that project is at this point.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to the honourable member. Our commitment, as you know, the former government made a commitment to reduce wait times for radiation therapy, which requires then an investment. I think it's an investment of roughly $10 million, and but it wasn't possible to do that, do the construction this year, and so the $10 million that was in the budget in May has been taken out of this year's budget, but the revenue that is required for the architectural work to design the bunkers, it has been allocated, and in fact I think the DHA has that work underway, or certainly that directive has been given to them that they can go ahead and do the planning, and it's something that we will look at for next year's budget. So that was a $10 million mitigation. Yes.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, originally the project could have flowed, I believe, I remember it was like up to $24 million for a project there. But what happened towards the end of my mandate, and probably moved over into the member for Cape Breton, or for Colchester North's time there, was the beyond addition of kind of, oops, we forgot about the renovation of the Dixon Centre. Because with the addition of the radiation therapy, of the radiation machines, that we actually don't have enough patient flows, patient space, in order to flow people through there. So there was sort of a whoops at the end, and that's more of a sort of a warning to you that it seems like as hard as we work to get those numbers correct, and we go back and forth so many times in making sure numbers are right, that it always seems at the last minute that there's always a way to find more dollars, or to all of a sudden ask for more dollars. So it always tended to be my frustration when it came to capital construction, especially with the Department of Health, that there were always some whoopses. So I thank you for knowing that there are still some dollars there to complete the design work and to get those bunkers in and to make our, I believe we had made a commitment to the federal government to try to reduce the wait time. And it was kind of a funny thing because we knew our wait time was actually within the benchmark at this point, but we knew with the incidence of cancer in the province that we needed to have the extra capacity in which to add that. And if I remember correctly too, there was also a unit to go into Cape Breton, and I believe that one actually is, I believe that one actually is in place. So I'm just wondering maybe at this time, where is that wait time? Are we going to be okay in trying to meet that wait time or not?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I understand that in November, the health ministers from Atlantic Canada will meet and will, we're working toward the signing of a memorandum between ministers to move that forward. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Argyle.
And while we're still on wait times and maybe working with our federal counterparts, they do have they did have, and I don't know whether they still now is a very very aggressive target to move wait times in those five areas, and maybe just sort of to understand the pit. And one that I tend to see as the pitfall there that I tried to bring forward as minister in working with the other provinces and working with the federal government is that as you're focusing on 1, 2, or 3 of these wait times, you can't forget about all the other lists that are actually sitting there, either getting longer or shorter depending on what kind of flow is there. So I know you'll take that as a bit of constructive work there to make sure that we don't forget all the other things that are going on around us. The issue of our longest wait list will revolve around orthopedics and orthopedic surgery. I'm wondering, is there a new proposal coming from Capital District? Because I know they were working on some work there to try to bring their wait time down. I know there has been tons of discussion within this House when it came to Scotia surgery and those kinds of things. So I'm just wondering maybe where the minister is at this point on the wait time for orthopedic surgeries and maybe her thoughts on how we're going to get that one down.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and through you to the member, I want to thank him for the question. Wait times are certainly of concern to this government and to myself as minister and to the department. And we have a fair number of things underway to attempt to bring wait times down. I will ask the page to, when I'm finished, make a copy of this and then table a copy for the members here of wait times improvement in New Brunswick. And the reason I want to do this is it's a wonderful little chart that shows a significant, I think, decline in wait times for certain kinds of surgery in New Brunswick following the introduction of the wait time management system that they have there, which we just have recently launched here. I had the opportunity to be in New Glasgow at the Aberdeen last Friday to announce the beginning of this program in that DHA, and all of the DHAs will have this in place by July of 2010. And it essentially is a system that's very similar, quite similar, to New Brunswick. And one of the things that I was asked when I was in New Glasgow is, well, if this has been done in New Brunswick, has it made a difference? And this particular release by the New Brunswick government on the 29th of September 2009 shows what a difference it has made. And I'm really looking forward to similar results in this province. And as you know, would you make me a copy and then table one? Thanks. Okay, 4 copies, okay. So as you know, there are areas where we are within the national average. There are areas where we're very close to the national average, and then there are areas where we're a long way from the national average. And sadly, not so long ago, I can't remember which report, which group it was, if it was High or somebody else, but there was a report, and Nova Scotia got a failing grade for our wait times, and I think in particular orthopedic surgery is one of those areas where people wait much too long. And I'm convinced that we can indeed do better than we are, and we're working hard to get there. And the Capital District Health Authority is certainly working hard to get us there too, I believe. They have, the department has been in contact regularly. The DHA has submitted some new plans, and we're assessing them, and we will work with them to improve wait times so that people aren't off the job longer than they need be. They're not in pain, they're not in stress, and all of the kinds of stories you hear regularly about the long waits. We also, in our platform in the election, made a commitment to investing in pre-op kinds of programs, because there's a growing body of evidence, I would say, that suggests that many people who are waiting for surgery, if in fact they had access to preoperative services, perhaps some physiotherapy, different kinds of services, in fact may see a fundamental reduction in the pain that they experience and the difficulties that they're having. That would make the time between the diagnosis and surgery more, something that they could stand a little better without being in constant pain and agony. So these are the kinds of things I know that have been identified as best practices in other places. From time to time, I'll hear a really interesting documentary on, generally on, put in a little plug for CBC Radio here, but it tends to be the place where you will hear interviews. You have that great series with Dr. Brian Golden on a regular basis. That's right. And so quite often they talk about some of the techniques that have been used in other provinces. In some ways, we're not unique at all around the challenges around orthopedic surgery in particular. It seems to be a problem in many provinces, and different provinces have tackled it in different ways. So we try to look at what the best practices are, what our resources are, and always keeping in mind that we need to put patients first, and we can do better than we have done in the healthcare system to date.
The honourable member for Argyll.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, what I found too was you had about 4 different orthopedic programs. You had people who were referred to probably 2 or 3 of those programs. You had no idea who was on the list or how many people were on it. And why we were very, very happy to bring in that assessment clinic. I believe it's in Cobequid now, where there's a central referral now where you don't just go to your favorite orthopedic surgeon, you end up going to the referral clinic, and there you're seen by, I believe, nurses. Nurses are extremely important in our system. I'm looking up at Ghislaine because she would want me to say that. And once in a while, I believe there's an oversight by an orthopedic surgeon that sort of monitors what's happening in that clinic. And I don't know what the because I left soon after that got going, so I don't know maybe what the impact has been to individuals. But what we were also seeing is by the time you had your first referral, that was even before you were ever being booked for that surgery, is that your condition continues to get worse. A lot of the people that were being referred off, probably could use some physiotherapy or other kind of intervention rather than a knee replacement or hip replacement or what have you. So I'm just wondering how the assessment clinic has been working up to now. Is it fully up and running yet? And is Capital fully utilizing it? And is there an opportunity, I believe, for the other districts to start using that as well? Because I believe this was for the Capital program, and I'm not too sure if it was the Pictou, the New Glasgow one. I knew Kentville wasn't a part of it, but we were hoping that they would slowly get into that system as well.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the Honourable Member for the question. I can't give you any stats at this moment, but I can tell you that the clinic here has had an impact in terms of the from the time that you get referred till you see a specialist, that time has improved. That wait time has improved. But my understanding is that from the time you see a specialist who recommends that you have surgery and having the surgery, that time hasn't changed. So that still is this, it's pretty much the same as it always was. It's too long. People wait 16, 18, 24 months. And that's significantly longer than the benchmark that has been established. And that's what we need to tackle.
Thank you. The Honourable the Member for Argyll.
Which is why, Mr. Chair, Madam Minister, was the addition of the OR management program. I mean, that was sort of the next trick to try to create a more efficient OR system, to be able to have the information available to you so that each OR is using its capacity. I mean, many of our ERs are not ERs, but ORs are not used to capacity. We didn't have necessarily a handle on what kind of human resource we had to have available at all times in order to do that 1 or 2 or 3 extra surgeries in order to make a difference to the wait time, because there's a lot of people that end up sitting and waiting and unknown. The other piece that if I remember correctly was the patient portal. And the patient portal was one where when you finally got that referral to surgery, to know where you were, because the added frustration that I heard a lot was not the issue of 18 months. Of course, that was an important one. But during that 18 months, you had no clue when you were going to get a phone call from the hospital saying, okay, tomorrow's your day. Tomorrow's your day. Be in Halifax at a certain time. We're gonna get you ready to go into surgery. So I'm just wondering, maybe has there been any movement on that patient portal so people have an idea where they are in that process?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Yep. Yeah. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. That's a level of detail I don't have, but I can undertake to get it.
The Honourable Member for Argyll.
Thank you very much. And if it's gotten forgotten there somewheres, please push that for that one, because information is extremely important to the patients. Which is why I'll move on to the next issue. Is the OR system is the OR system that you announced the other day is sort of the basis for EMR. It is not the complete medical record, but it's a pretty darn good start of having that record. The frustrating part of electronic medical records, or the lack thereof, is that, you know, I can see my physician in Pubnico. You know, I get sick in Halifax, and they have no clue what kind of treatments I'm on, what kind of medicines I'm on. I think the French is coming out in me here. Or whatever. And I went to a number of conferences when we talked about the electronic medical record, and they likened it to, you know, if you had the airline industry, and the airline industry that you wanted to go to Vancouver, let's say. So you showed up at the airport and say, I want to go to Vancouver. And they say, well, listen, I can get you to Toronto. They put you on the airplane to Toronto. Boom, you get to Toronto, and then you got to do it all over again and going to see someone, reintroduce yourself, bring your passport, bring your information, pay your bill, and maybe hopefully get on a flight to Winnipeg, and then have to do it all over again. You know, so you would think, you know, after all this time that, you know, the country would have a record that can be seen in Halifax, that can be seen in Vancouver, and likewise. And in my mind, that was an extremely important philosophy and programming that we need here in Nova Scotia. We have the starts of it. The program you announced, as well as the PAC system, which is a very good example of really starting to work collaboratively, where I can go and get my, for example, I've got a cardiac issue that I'm dealing with right now. Non-life-threatening, so if anybody is worried about me, I'm sure you're not, but there you go. It'll be fine. Cecil is? Okay, we'll be fine. You know, basically I can go and get my echocardiogram in Yarmouth when I'm in my constituency, when I'm in my area, and I know that my doctor here in Halifax, my specialist, can see that echo in a matter of minutes. You know, so if there was issues, I've given myself permission to talk about this one. So if I have issues, I know that Dr. Nick's going to be able to give me a call and say, listen, I need you in here, and I need you in here now. That's the kind of healthcare that we need. We need a healthcare system that, you know, and I always got frustrated with it. It's like we seem we're like a pizza company where we expect to have everything in 30 minutes. We can't, but if we have the right systems in place, you know, God knows what we're actually going to have in the end. So just my thoughts on the electronic medical record system, making sure that we have that availability there. So I'm just wondering, maybe just to pick your brain a little bit, if you've had some discussions around that, and what you see as the future in electronic medical records.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thanks very much. The honourable member is right, you know, about the importance of the electronic medical record. It's really, for this day and age that we don't have it is kind of shocking, and it's certainly something that we really need. And I don't know if the honourable member has any influence with his federal counterparts, then now would be the time to use it, honourable member, because as you know, Nova Scotia's strategy really, because this is extraordinarily expensive to start to build an electronic medical record in all of those places where we need it, physicians' offices and in our acute care facilities and everywhere really. So we've been using our own resources along with resources from the federal government under Canada Infoway, and we have incrementally been building our system and putting the pieces in place. But I think quite sadly, Mr. Chair, we just learned last week that the federal government have withdrawn, or they are not providing a huge amount of investment, something in the magnitude countrywide of like $500 million or something like that, for the remainder of the year. And this is not good news for where we want to go. We are strongly supported by Doctors Nova Scotia, who understand the need and they understand the value of building an electronic medical record. And so with the shift in the federal government's focus, because at one point they were very keen on building an electronic medical record, with the shift in their focus, we're still committed, but we have to find dollars. And as I was saying the other day, it would be great if money was no objective, but money is an objective. It is something we have to concern ourselves with, the financial situation that we're looking at. And so, we'll get there. I have great hope and a belief that we will get there and we will find the resources, but this is certainly a setback.
The honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much for those comments. And I know I'll try my best to influence the federal government. I don't know how well I will do, but I certainly will call the number of people that I do know. Of course, Dick Alvarez with Canada Health Infoway is a phenomenal individual. The second he calls to see you, please see him, because you'll be in. After you meet him, you just feel all energetic about moving on the things, even though you don't have a cent to do it with. But Dick also, I know, has the best interest of all of Canada to try to work with. It's a bit upsetting that maybe the feds have pulled away $500 million when it comes to funding for Canada Health Infoway, by the sound of it. So maybe we're going to have to talk to Leona and the Honourable Leona Glukak, the Federal Minister of Health, and maybe try to push her into working towards it. And I know Leona understands it as well, because, of course, during my tenure as Minister, she was Minister of Nunavut at the same time that I was, before she moved on to federal politics. So I thank you for that, and like I said, it's a very important thing. It's one that makes sense, but it's one that comes with tremendous cost. I mean, you talked about your increase, was $6.3 million for HASP, or more, and I'm sort of looking over at Linda, but that's a computer program which makes sense why you put it in. But the implementation of some of these programs continue to escalate far beyond anybody's wildest expectations. So, it'd be really nice if we could find. It's always fun. I'm going to tangent off here a little bit. It's always interesting to find the consultant that actually could give you a number that made sense. They seem to fish with you. And I see the deputy minister shaking his head with it, because I know he's been a part of some of these fishing expeditions. But it seems like a fishing expedition on behalf of companies, and with a certain price, they hook you, they pull you in, and then all of a sudden you can't pull it in anymore, and you need a higher test line in order to pull these things in. So it continually goes completely out of whack, and that's probably why many provinces are not in as far as they need to be in when it comes to electronic medical record, or why we're not in as far as we need to be in, because just anything we try to do on one side escalates and you can't get over to where you need to be. My final question will try to revolve around some infrastructure dollars. When I was minister, we continually heard about infrastructure, especially in the districts. Whether it was renovations to places like Queen's General, or whether it was the construction of hospitals like the one in Truro, continually a frustrating process. I mean, right now in Nova Scotia, as we talked about during our infrastructure process, that there's $3 billion worth of infrastructure deficit in the province. $1 billion of that is really attributable to the healthcare system in Nova Scotia. I do notice, though, in the numbers that were provided to us during budget, there is a variance as well, a decrease of $32.5 million in infrastructure. So I'm just wondering what makes up that change between, and I believe again that's our budget's your budget, it's just where that change is, the 3.2.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and to the honourable member. The biggest part of that $32 million decrease is the Colchester Hospital, and that's because it can't be completed this year. I believe that the last RFPs that came in were very significantly over budget, and so they've been put out, they've been retendered. And so that's part of that. Yes, and the radiation therapy bunkers, we talked about 10 million. So when you combine Colchester and those bunkers, you come up with close to the 32, and there's some other minor, I think there were a few other little minor things, but nothing close to those two big ones. That accounts for.
The honourable member from Argyle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that breakdown. Which leads me to sort of a second part of the question is with the issue with Colchester. And Colchester was a tremendous consternation to us during our time because that project ballooned from, I believe, the original OIC allowed somewhere near $100 million for the construction of the Colchester Hospital. That ballooned to, I believe, to me, allowing them to $155 million. So, I mean, yeah, it's numbers that just completely defy any sense of reasonable why a facility would end up costing that. And then it was sort of the discussion, you know, just to, you know, here's through my process of working with Jed, and, you know, God rest his soul, I'm sure he's rolling over on this one too. Jed Ritzy, who was the chair of the district at that time, who did pass away a number of months ago. You know, once we had the 155, and then all of a sudden everybody's asking for the MRI, which in my mind, that we had let the doctors and the system decide, well, listen, you know, maybe that we don't need an MRI there. There's one in Pictou, New Glasgow, there's one in Halifax, and maybe we don't need one there. Well, the 155 all of a sudden became 160 because you had to find some dollars for the MRI that would go in the hospital. So I'm just wondering, you know, I know there's a cost, there's a problem in the cost, and I believe it had to do with heating or the air handling system or whatever it is. Could you give me more breakdown, an idea of what that is?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yes, it was the electrical and the mechanical systems. It came in way over budget, and we think what's driving this is the infrastructure projects at the same time. But I know what you're saying when you're saying once you're in so deeply, how do you get out? That's the problem. Not that you want to get out, but how do you stop this train is what I'm saying. And it's very difficult. And that project is definitely extraordinarily expensive. It's an extraordinarily expensive project, and it ain't done yet.
The Honourable Member for Argyle.
Well, thank you very much, and also, you know, if you know, after we're done with estimates and the budget's approved and all that fun stuff, you know, it would be nice once in a while maybe to get an update on how that project's doing, because I know the member for Truro-Bible Hill as well as the previous member for Truro-Bible Hill are very interested in making sure that project continues to move forward. You know, it looks like a phenomenal place so far. From what you see as you pull off into Truro. Seems like an awful lot of work going on there, and structurally it looks really nice, but it's not a hospital yet, and it's not a hospital until the specialists and the nurses and the doctors and everybody else that works there are in there to provide service to the people of Colchester. There's a number of other projects too going on around the province. I believe there was the renovation, I believe, to the Inverness Hospital. There was some work happening. I know there's some discussions at the Bridgewater Hospital. Just wondering if are there any other projects right now that are truly going forward, and maybe what their level of completion might be at this point.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. There are 4 projects that have recently been completed. In DHA 3, the Annapolis Valley Regional Hospital redevelopment. DHA 4, Lillian Fraser Memorial Hospital. DHA 8, an ER expansion at the Cape Breton Hospital. And of course, DHA 9, the Halifax Infirmary expansion. Mr. Chair, in terms of DHA 1, that DHA is embarking on a master facilities planning process, and so the Queens and Bridgewater work that the honourable member referred to will certainly be part of that process of planning. We know we had discussions here on the floor Tuesday about the VG site in Capital and the Dartmouth General, and we didn't talk about Cobequid, but if Good Dave will, the honourable member from Sackville Cobequid, if he was on that side of the floor, he certainly would be talking about it, and he talks to me about it all the time. So there are lots of issues with respect to our facilities, and we have that very much top of mind. We also, I think, to bring a balance, and I give a little pitch here for health promotion and protection. In a way, I'm very pleased to be, not in a way, I am very pleased to have both portfolios, because I also say to myself, at what stage do we make a decision to stop investing so heavily in bricks and mortar, and where are we going to start, when are we going to start investing in people, in their communities, and doing things that will improve people's health, so that the pressure on the healthcare system and the need to have all of these big expensive facilities will be somewhat less, of a much less great magnitude than it is now. And so in some ways that's my challenge as I look forward to where we're going to take these 2 departments. Thanks, Mr. Chair. With that, I'd like to adjourn the estimates.
Okay, the motion before the committee is to adjourn the estimates debate, and we'll return to them after the late show. Good. Is it agreed? Agreed. Carried.